Check, check, check. Check, check. Checked. 1, 2. That's very loud, isn't it? We'll get started in just a few minutes because we're going to live stream. But I just need 4 volunteers, or what you would call deacons, to come down, because we're going to get the roaming mics going, because this is going to be quite interactive. And so you'll get a chance to respond and have conversation with Pastor Geoff, and it'll be quite, especially after lunch, it needs to be interactive. Is that right? Because where's all the blood? It's not in the brain. So we need to be interactive. So thanks, brother. All right, so if we kind of get you guys around, we'll have some interaction and go from there. All right. Now, I'll get Geoff to share more when he gets up regarding resources, materials. At the end, we'll talk a little practical about sort of the follow-on and what we'll do and things like that. So we'll have plenty of time to go into that. We've got 4 minutes. Should I wait 4 minutes before we live stream? It's already going. Welcome live stream. Just edit that out. No, I'm joking. All right, well, let's get started. And how was Haystacks, everyone? Should we make it a 29th fundamental? It's condition of salvation or something, you know. Cheesecakes were good. We'll put them in as a 30th fundamental. We'll see what we can do. Yeah, there was this funny thing when I came into Adventism, all the new lingo, haystacks, and I was like, where's the hay? What are you talking? Where's these piles of hay you're talking about? So you learn all of it. Okay, well, let's begin and look forward, Geoff, to you sharing with us what's been going on in your church and different things. I'll let you go into that, but let's begin with prayer as we move into this section. Father in heaven, we pause to recognize that we can do nothing without you. And now as we move into a very practical discussion, we know that not only Glenvale Church is here, but churches from all around the region who represent you are here, wanting to learn, Lord, how can we serve you? How can you take the 5 loaves and 2 fish that we have and feed the multitude? And Lord, we look at ourselves and we know that we don't have all the knowledge, and we certainly don't live up to the standard. But Lord, we know that you can use us, and we just want to take that step, Lord. And so today, as we hear from Pastor Geoff, who's probably one of the most experienced evangelists in Australia, to share with us soul winning, small groups, practical ministry, I pray that this doesn't just fall on the hard soil, but we take this and we run with it as a church in this region. So we pray for your blessing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Daniel. That was a good introduction. And thank you for coming back. This is what they call the grave session. Graveyard session. Very difficult to keep everybody awake, but I want to share with you some things that I wish I knew when I was in my younger years of ministry. I wish that I knew this even 10 years ago. What I'm going to share now. I've learnt this of latter years, and I have to confess I'm embarrassed to say it because it is so fundamental that I don't know how we've missed it. And I'm not the only one that's missed it, but I want to share it with you this afternoon, and that's why we'll have, if there's a discussion, you know, you might have questions, or you might ask, how does that work? And you just feel free. This is not a sermon. This is a discussion, and the only reason I'm standing up here is because it's easier for the filming and so forth, but I'd prefer to be among you and doing it because it's more relaxed that way. But if I was to hold this book up and tell you, you won't see the title from where you are, and I mentioned welfare ministry, how many of you have read this book? Probably you're like me, hadn't read it until, I've read it of course now, but I have to confess, for many years I hadn't read it. Why is this book important? This book is what we refer to as the blueprint of how to run a church. This is the blueprint. And yet it's hardly ever mentioned. And I want to encourage you to get this book. Now, you can either have it physically, I prefer to have it a physical book, or you can just get online. And you know, on the Ellen White estate, you can get it and read it online. So you don't have to buy it. But I prefer a physical copy, and you can say, well, that's because of your age, and it may be. But the reason I like a physical copy is that I can mark it and I can remember it. You see, the trouble with the Bible on the phones and so forth, like some of the young people have, and I don't want to wish to be critical of that, but that wouldn't help me because it doesn't help my memory. Part of my memory in helping me to remember where texts are is I can remember it's in Romans on the top of the page there. I remember that, reading it there. Or it's on the bottom of the page, or, you know, something that identifies and helps me. I may not be able to tell you right off the top of my hand what is the exact chapter and verse, but I can soon find it and quickly locate it for you. You get the idea? Because that's helping my memory. But when it's on a phone or when it's on your computer, it's very, very difficult to, because they're all on the same page, aren't they? There it is. And I'm just saying, if you want to memorize, I think it's more helpful to have the physical book. So whether you get the physical book or not, that's up to you. But I want to read you a few statements in this book. And then we'll discuss some of it and how we can put it into operation. This is page 29 of the book. I have been instructed. Now, that's pretty important, isn't it? I have been instructed to refer our people to the 58th chapter of Isaiah. Read this chapter carefully and understand the kind of ministry that will bring life into our churches. Aha! Now, there's some pretty important words in that few lines I've just read. I have been instructed. And if you want to bring life to your churches, read and study the 58th chapter of Isaiah. So I decided that I would. Now, the 58th chapter of Isaiah, if you've got your Bible or on your phone, whatever it is, just turn up Isaiah 58. And let's just read it, because some of you won't know just off the top of your head what Isaiah 58 says. But have you got Isaiah 58? All right. Now it starts off by saying, cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet. So, sounding pretty important to start. You know, when we hear the trumpet this morning, stands out, doesn't it? Tell my people their transgression, and the house of Jacob their sins, yet they seek me daily, and delight to know my ways, as a nation that did righteousness and did forsake the ordinance of their God. In other words, the Bible is saying these people want to find out what God wants them to do. Verse 3, why we have feasted, they say, and you have not seen. Why have we afflicted our souls, and you take no notice? So the people are having a go at God here. You don't seem to take any notice of what we're doing. In fact, in the day of your fast, you find pleasure and exploit all your labourers. Indeed, you fast for strife and debate, and to strike with a fist of wickedness, and you will not fast as you do this day, to make your voice heard on high. It is a fast that I have chosen. Now, God says, I want to tell you the real fast. A day for a man to afflict his soul, it is to bow down his head like a bulrush, and to spread out sackcloth and ashes. Would you call this a fast and an acceptable day of the Lord? Is not the fast that I have chosen to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, that you break every yoke? It is not to share your bread with the hungry, and to bring to your house the poor who are cast out, when you see the naked, that you cover them, and not hide yourself from their flesh. What's God saying here? What's he saying the real fast consists of? Yes, helping people in need. Now, the first part of chapter 58 is all about that, and I'd like you to read it when you go home. Take it seriously and go through it verse by verse and think about it. But the basic message is that we need to care for those in our society who are less fortunate than ourselves. We have a responsibility to do that. And we'll be commenting more upon that in a moment and how in a practical way we can do that. But we'll talk about the theory for a start. Then this chapter goes into something which I have never been able to reconcile in my mind until latter years. Because you all know the verses at the end of this chapter. If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and honour him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. In other words, it goes into a very strong invite about the Sabbath and how to keep the Sabbath. And I've often thought to myself, what has that got to do with what's just gone on before when it's talking about feeding the hungry and caring for those less fortunate? And I've struggled in my mind to reconcile. These two things seem to be completely separate. But I read something that helped me to understand, and now I see it very clearly. On page 32 of this book, listen to what she says. The title is The Twofold Reform of Isaiah 58. Twofold Reform. The work specified in these words, Isaiah 58, is the work God requires his people to do. Well, we read that a minute ago. It is a work of God's own appointment. In other words, God has appointed us to do this. With the work of advocating the commandments of God and repairing the breach that has been made in the law of God, we are to mingle compassion for suffering humanity. So what are we to do according to what she's saying here? We are to row the boat with two oars. We are to row it with a strong emphasis on the purity of our doctrines, right? The Sabbath being the one that's specified here. We're to row the boat this way. Now, if we only row the boat with one oar, what happens? You go around in a circle, you get nowhere. And I'm going to suggest that sometimes some of us have concentrated on a doctrinal stance, which is right, but if that's the only thing we do, then we go in a circle. The other oar that we've got to concentrate on is working for those in our community who are less fortunate than ourselves. In other words, being true to our doctrines and caring for those in need. That's what Isaiah 58 is all about. And she says, I've been shown by one that we are to make Isaiah 58 our study to how we can better appropriate and work for those in our society to grow our church. And that's what we want to talk about in a short while. If you come over to page 66 in this book, there's something else that she talks about here, the whole chapter really, on the Dorcas Society. You got a Dorcas Society here? No, it's not the same thing. That's the problem. That's the problem. Years ago, and I don't know how many years ago, we brought in the ADRA. Now, I'm not opposed to ADRA. I think it does the work, but it does not do the work of the Dorcas Society. And what's happened is that we feel good in our hearts now. We give to ADRA and we support ADRA and we feel that we have done our work for the community. That is not true. And that's the problem with ADRA. If I can use that word, I don't want to undermine ADRA, because ADRA does a work that cannot be done in other areas.
When I did say ADRA, I was referring to our local shop here that does do work in the community and looks after people in the town. I wasn't referring to us giving money to work.
No, all right. I can ask some more questions, which I have of the leader in that shop. I had a talk to her this morning about ADRA, and I know some things about ADRA, about your shop. The question I would ask, how many souls have you baptised since you've had the shop? What missionary outreach is that shop doing? What do you do to talk to people about Jesus and his saving grace, to the people that come into ADRA? Unfortunately, ADRA has part of its constitution that it is not to be evangelistic. Now, I have a problem with that, but I'm not here to downgrade ADRA. That's not my purpose at all. As I said, I think ADRA has a place and a work to do which is important, but it is not acting at the level of the local church. Because the way it's being structured, that's not working that way. That's why when the church originally set up the Dorcas Society, it was so that every member could be involved in helping people. And when you help people, as we're going to notice in a moment, if you help someone, how is their heart toward you? Is it warm? Yes. Very open. And that's why Sister White says that the work of working for our neighbours and helping them is the best method of missionary outreach that there is. Because helping people opens their heart to find out more. And we have to be in tune with our understanding so that we can say the right things at the right time, not bashing them over the head the first time we meet them, but as we develop a friendship with people and we win their confidence, then we have an opportunity of sharing the gospel. Does that sound a logical thing? It works, let me tell you. And that's why she is advocating so much that we have the Dorcas Society in the church. Now, the church that I belong to hasn't had the Dorcas Society in it for years. And yet part of the blueprint is that we have a Dorcas Society in the church. Not just sewing thing. The work of the Dorcas Society is a very broad work. And it can do whatever we choose to do, and whatever our strengths are, that's the path that we ought to go down with our Dorcas Society. And once again, we haven't got time this afternoon to go into all of those fine details, but I want to outline first of all the blueprint. What is the blueprint? And if we can get the blueprint in our minds, then we work toward making that happen in our church. And I want to tell you something. When you start to work with the blueprint, do you know what happens? God blesses you. And it's because we've gotten away from the blueprint that some of God's blessing has not been able to be poured on us, because we're out of harmony with his plan. All right, the Dorcas Society. Now, there's something else I want to share with you in this book. That's why I want you to get it. I want you to get convicted in your own heart about it as you read it. This is page 107. Listen to this. The formation of small companies as a basis of Christian effort has been presented to me by one who cannot err. And she talks in the next few pages about the development of what we might term today small groups. Now, unfortunately, the small groups that some Adventist churches have gotten into have all been based on the Sunday keeping model And that's why they've never worked. I don't know of any church that's been successful with small groups that's been based on Hybels or any of these Willow Creek or any of these churches. Not one of them that I know of has ever been successful. Not a single one. Because it's all based on the wrong premise. On the other hand, I'm going to share with you, and your pastor has these books. One of our men in Victoria, Johnny Wong, who has developed 4 churches, 4 brand new churches in the city of Melbourne. We're not talking theory now. We're talking about where the rubber hits the road. Very successful. And we are going to, I think your pastor will want to get him to speak to you. And it's not always possible physically, but we can do it by what do you call it? Zoom. Yeah, Zoom. That's right. And I want to tell you how we are doing it at Stanmore, because we can't have him. In fact, I don't think he's ever been physically to Stanmore, but we regularly have him on Zoom. And we are developing small groups, because in small groups is the way the church really grows. And this is what we would do. When you find people who are interested and you perhaps have helped them with whatever you've helped them, then when you have small groups, you can invite them into your small group. And Johnny has set out very, very clearly how a small group must be run. There are very, very clear points that must be followed if you're going to run a successful small group. So far, we have noticed that there are 3 things. First of all, we need to study Isaiah 58, she says. And secondly, we must establish the Dorcas Society in our church. And thirdly, we must make sure that we have small groups, because they're the best method of evangelism. And once again, we can't spend this afternoon just going into all the details of small groups, because the small group training will probably take nearly 12 months. So you can see it's very thorough. And when you start to run a small group, you are very much able to do it because you have been trained well. Get the idea? We're not just suggesting that you go out and run a small group without training. And Johnny Wong and your pastor, and we've got a book here that yes, thanks, Daniel. This is the book that Johnny Wong has written. And as a church at Stanmore, every Tuesday night is small group education night. And we have a group, not the whole church, because not everybody's interested in small groups. Not everybody's interested in any one thing in the church. That's why we've got many things in the church, and those that are appealed to by this do that, those that are appealed to by that do that. We don't all have to do exactly the same thing. But every Tuesday night we follow this book. We read it together, we comment, we talk about it, and at the end of each chapter there are DVD or online material that you can get from their website, which covers the chapter that we've just read together. Get the idea? And so it's all outlined in the book, and you will, those of you who want to get involved with small groups, remember, what did she say? I have been shown by one who does not err. So if you and I get involved in small groups, can we expect God to bless us? Absolutely we will. And it's transforming some of our members as they realise it's possible to win souls. Oh, I can do it. Because we're following the principles that are simple to follow, but when you know what you're doing, then you feel in control in the sense of knowing what's going on. And you know not to put your foot into it. because we've been trained in those areas. And there's lots of material that Daniel will share with you. And this book is your primary resource centre. And Daniel has a whole bunch of these books that those of you who are interested in reading. I know that Bavin's been reading this. Bavin's been reading this book. Bavin? Where is he? Are you asleep? No. Not yet. And he was just telling me how he's enjoying it. And I want to tell you that I just love this book. It just makes running a small group easy.
Geoff,
when you follow the principles. Yes, someone's speaking.
Just while you're on there, yeah, it's not the Holy Spirit. If you've come from a regional church, we try to let Dolby, Chinchilla, Warwick, other churches know. If you're from those churches and you would like a book, we're happy to give you some books for free to take back to your churches. So we've bought a big box. We know Highfields. We think we've given some to your leaders. So if you don't have one and you're part of the leadership teams there, come see me afterwards. We'll try and get a book in your hand.
Yes.
Yep.
You'll be tremendously blessed by this book, let me tell you. You'll become a new person when you read this. It's called Business Unusual. And he explains how he's planted, or Gateway in Melbourne have planted 4 new churches. Now, when someone grows 4 new churches, I want to listen to what they've got to say, wouldn't you? Yeah, we're not talking theory. We're talking about someone who actually works and made it work. And he's written this book on how to do it and to be successful. So that's why we encouraged Daniel, and he did the right thing in getting this book. And I may want to refer to it again, so I'll just keep it a little longer. Now, there's something else that this book talks about. There are many things, of course, that it talks about. I'm just giving you the main points. There's another point that she raises here, and that is that we ought to get involved with businesses that can support the church. Now, if your church is like mine, there are always more needs than there is money, isn't that right? Yeah. And so we have decided, we have registered ourselves as a business. And our business is called Try Healthy. If you look that up, you'll find that it's there registered. And all our business is done under the name Try Healthy. At the moment, we are selling honey, and we are raising money for the church. We have also registered our kitchen as a charity kitchen, which is tax deductible, DGR, which means that if a person gives any donation toward our kitchen charity, we can give them a tax deduction. And we've done that on purpose because there are quite a number of people who want a tax deduction, and it is helpful to them, and when they know it's helping the work of God as well, that they're doubly blessed, and we're blessed. So it's cost us a bit, and there's a bit of work involved with the DGR, but nevertheless, it is worth it for the very reason that I've just said. We have gotten money that we would never have gotten had it not been for our DGR. And so that's something else that you can consider as churches. First of all, I think that we would be happy in consultation together, of course, but we would be happy to allow you to use our Try Healthy rather than you have to start up your own business. I mean, you can do it if you want to, that's fine. Do exactly what we did. But you've got to come up with a name. That's not easy. And then secondly, you've got to register it all and so forth, and there's a bit of money involved with that and so forth and so on. But if we may be able to work out a scheme when we understand that our aims are the same, that we would allow you to use our name, Try Healthy, so you could market your stuff under that name. There's an advantage for everybody, and that is that Try Healthy then gets more broadly known, And we would like to see eventually that it is very, very well known around Australia. So that's something else that we can think about, or that you can think about for the future. But she talks about in this book that we ought to be involved with business. And she talked about this, running restaurants, vegetarian restaurants and so forth. And that's one method of running a business, but not everybody wants to run a restaurant. It's a lot of work involved in a restaurant. But there are some folk who have a real passion for that. And she talks about how it helped the church. And she said it was open 6 days of the week and brought in money to the church. And then she warns all of us about that we've got to make sure that the business is not the end in itself, that we don't get absorbed in making money, that we forget the real purpose of us making money. Get the idea? That's a danger that we've got to continually remind ourselves about, because none of us are immune to that. And the more successful the business gets, the more likely it is that you can get involved with the business side. And remember, the business is the tail, and the tail is not to wag the dog. The tail is incidental, it's necessary, but it's the tail, not the dog. And so we've got to always remember that. So as a church, I've taken very seriously the statement where she says the minister's job is to make sure that every person in the church has their job to do. And that job is not just as the deacon or opening the church and all those things that have got to be done and are necessary, but she's talking about a job to do as far as winning souls are concerned. Every one of us. And not every one of us is going to do the same thing. If I asked you to go door knocking this afternoon, some of you would freak out. And I'm not sure that going cold turkey knocking on doors is a profitable way to do it these days. I think there's so much resistance against people who knock on your door that all you do is discourage yourself. But there are many other methods. And one of the best methods that I know is what she says here, that if we help people, then their hearts become open. Now, let me tell you what we're planning to do. We haven't yet started this. Next time I come to see you, Daniel, if there's a next time, I'm hoping that we will have a lot more practical and figures and facts to share with you. But let me tell you the dream that we have to see whether you think it's a good dream and that you could do something similar yourself. We have just put in a professional kitchen. And the professional kitchen, which has all the big stoves and, you know, it's $1 million. Looks like $1 million anyway. It didn't cost $1 million, but we imported all this from China. We have access to China. And we brought the stuff in at a fraction of the cost. And in fact, we are very happy to share that knowledge with others and to help other churches develop when they haven't got a big kitchen or they need to develop something more, that we're very happy to bring the material in for them at the same cost. But we have put this kitchen in, as I said, a professional kitchen, and the purpose of that is not just for Sabbath lunches. The purpose is that we want to react with the public, and we are going to run cooking demonstrations, not in our hall, but online. We are going to advertise through social media and through handbills in our district and tell the people in our church area that we are running classes to help mothers develop good lunches for their children. We are going to run classes to help them have a plant-based diet. We are running classes to help folk with diabetes. You know, all the needs that we know that are in our society, we're going to try to target those with those needs. Because people will tune in their own home to a cooking demonstration while they will never come out to a church hall. because of prejudice, you know. But when they can do it in their own home, they're much more likely. After we've won their confidence, then we're going to invite them to a special meal at the church, you know, in the hall. And in that way, we're taking it in 2 steps rather than expecting them to come straight to the church. We'll meet them in their home. And the plan is that in the home, apart from the first day that we do it, is that we will give them the ingredients that we're going to cook next week. We'll tell them next week we're going to cook. You can see I'm not a cook. But what would you, the ladies, what would you cook? Soybean patties, would you? Or I don't know whether that sounds good. But whatever the girls feel, and not only the girls, but mainly it's girls, women, who have a burden in this area, which is wonderful, they will give us the thing, and we will say, look, next Sunday afternoon, or next Tuesday night, or whatever it is, we're going to cook so-and-so, and you will need these ingredients. Then on the screen goes the ingredients. Then if you buy the ingredients, then you can cook along with us. And so they're not just sitting there passively listening and they'll forget what you're doing, but the very fact that they're involved in doing it themselves means that it sticks in their minds. And I believe after we do that and show some of the reasons why we eat this way and why it's best to eat this way, that gradually we will win confidences. And when you win confidences, then the next step is that they want to find out more of what you're doing. Does that sound logical? And I believe that we're following the blueprint when we're doing things like that. We want to run stalls. I think there is still an opportunity for us to run stalls, and you'd probably be a lot easier here in this community than in the city where we are. But we have a lot of yuppies in our area. Young marrieds who've got 2 incomes and good incomes and are time poor. And we've just been approached by one of our members who is telling me, just rang me 3 or 4 days ago and said, look, I've got a cook who's been used to running restaurants. She's out of work at the moment, and would we be interested in getting her involved in this? And I said, well, maybe. And well, I've thought about it since, and what we're going to suggest to her is that she might cook in our kitchen that we can hire out to her, so that produces an income for us. It also provides her with the opportunity of doing the cooking. Then she can sell those things, because she's a vegetarian, she can sell those things to the restaurants. And I believe there's a tremendous need among the restaurants for already made vegetarian rissoles and patties and this type of food. And if she has it already cooked, I believe that there's a tremendous sale for that. And I believe that if we get involved with things like this, that God will give us more opportunities and help us, people come out of the woodwork with ideas that we perhaps didn't think of ourselves, but when the opportunity arises, yeah, there is an opportunity. That's a good opening. And we learn as we go along, because we need God's guidance in what we're doing, and God has promised to bless us. And part of that blessing is to give us knowledge and opportunities, because each of us is responsible for the community around which our church lives. And we want to become known in our community as a church that cares and does things. And so the food side of things is our strength as Adventists. The other churches cannot compete with us in this area. And so let's play to our strengths. I believe that that's a principle of business. Whatever is your strength, play on it and use it. So here, what about you thinking of getting involved with such an idea, so that you can make friends with the community? The whole idea is not just making money. The whole idea is to make contacts with people. Contacts is the name of the game. Because the more contacts you have, the more opportunities you will have to invite some of those contacts to your small groups, the more opportunities you will have to bring them to church, because sometimes bringing a person to church first up may not always be the best way to go about it. But to bring them into a small group, as you will soon find out if you're going to be interested in learning about small groups, is a marvellous way, because you develop so close friends so quickly. And folk just love the food, because you have food every night, every time they come. And there's nothing that's more calculated to win friends than to eat over food. And Johnny here makes it very plain how we're to run that food. It's not just a buffet or anything like that. He explains exactly how to do it for the maximum benefit. And so I want to commend this to you, and we will perhaps spend some time, Daniel, in the future, perhaps working with the church, the small groups. When you get together, we can perhaps have a Zoom meeting together. We'll get Johnny online, and he can help us, because we will be instructed from the very best. And my belief is that if we use those who are successful in those areas and we learn from them, then we'll become successful ourselves. Now, I've talked, there may be some questions or maybe some comments or some ideas that you have that I can learn from too. So in discussing this is a two-way thing. So is there anyone with any questions or any comments, anything you want to ask about? Or comment on, or contribute to? Yes, put their hand up. And my brother, whom we baptised over in Bunbury. You know, when he came to the church in Bunbury, when I was running some meetings, if any of you watch 3ABN, and you see the evangelistic program that I run, this is the program that he came to. It was a real program. 22 nights later, yes. But it was worth it. We got our money's worth, don't you think? Yeah. Yes, that's good. All right, any questions? Just put your hand up and then we'll give you the mic. Laban, up the back. Yep.
I'm just going to comment, Geoff, and what I've read already in the book. Johnny Wong and his group certainly prayed, fasted, did all the things you would normally expect, but he's made it very plain in the book that they were true to the Adventist message.
Yep.
And that comes out in the book.
Yes.
And I think he's saying without that, it won't work. Is
Correct.
that right? Is that what he says? I haven't got far enough into it.
It is the Adventist message that makes us what we are. You cannot do this if you aren't an Adventist to the very back teeth. We've got to be Adventists to the back teeth. And don't you think that young people don't want to hear our message? I had a young girl come to me today at lunchtime. Young 20-year-old who said, "Pastor, I'm beginning to understand the Adventist message for the first time in my life. I'm beginning to understand what it's about." Now, there's a lot of things she's got to learn yet, but let me tell you, she's a young woman who's a young person who wants to hear. She was telling me she doesn't come to this church, although she was brought up here, went to school here, but she doesn't reside here now. She has a group of young people up at Pine Rivers. And she said, every one of the young people that is in my group needs to hear these messages. Because she said they don't understand. And that's exactly what we were saying this morning. That's the tragedy. That's what is... And if ever as we need to make sure that we understand what we're about, then we can share it. Then suddenly we get excited and say, that's the most logical thing I've heard. I feel confident now, after hearing about 1844 this morning, I can stand with my head erect. I'm not towered by someone who says it's not important, so you don't even know what you're talking about. When you know what you're talking about, come back and talk to me. But don't talk a lot of hot air when you don't know what you're talking about. Brother, we'll come to you in a moment. Yes.
In my generation, we used to understand what things stood for, but nowadays you hear 3 or 4 letters that stand for something, something, something. You mentioned DGR. Haven't a clue what DGR means in these charity business donations, etc. I find a lot of that in this day.
Yes. Sorry. I'm trying to think what DGR actually represents. What it means... Yes. Now, what it means is you can get a tax deduction. If you just remember, it's a tax deduction for your donation. You cannot get that unless you have what they call DGR registration. Sorry? Aha, there we are. Now you know. So we can talk DGR and we all know what we're talking about. Yes, that's good. Thank you very much, sister, for that. Yes, at the back. And then we've got someone, brother, over here.
I'm just going to say that they do small groups, or knock my teeth out. They do small groups already in other churches.
Yes.
And look, even with Rick Warren and the churches that I go to attend, but it's not something common in the Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah. What they do from those Sunday keeping models is very different to what we're talking about. And by the way, Rick Warren and these things have failed. It is not successful. He himself says that. But the small groups that he's postulating are very, very different to an Adventist model. Adventism is different to a Sunday-keeping church because we have a distinct message. Sunday keepers, in the main, are much the same. But in the Adventist church, being an Adventist is different to being a Sunday-keeping. I'm not saying Sunday-keeping people aren't Christians. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there's a difference. The same as there's a difference between chalk and cheese. One's not right and the other's not wrong. They're just chalk and cheese. There's a difference between Adventism and Sunday keepers. And that which may work, if you want to believe it works in Sunday keeping churches, does not work in the Adventist church. It's a different model. And there's nobody that can show me where it does work in the Adventist church. Because it doesn't. Brother, you've got a question over.
Yeah, Pastor Geoff, I just wanted to share some sort of experience in my short life so far. Just that I found that as we've had pastors come and go in my own church back in Brisbane, yes, sometimes there is a slant towards tearing down traditional views of Seventh-day Adventist doctrine, which I believe are biblical. But then we have a pastor that will come along who just preaches the standard Seventh-day Adventist message, and all of a sudden there are people coming in off the street to hear, yep, like God is actually leading them to us.
Correct.
And so, yeah, look, I firmly believe that God does bless those who are faithful to simply what he wants us to do.
Correct.
I've had an experience where going through Brisbane City, handing out great controversies, on a day where there were some significant things happening in the news. And we had a gentleman, I gave him a book, and next Sabbath he was in church. Mm-hmm. I didn't message him during the week or anything like that, but when I've come to see that when we are simply faithful to the simple things God asks us to do, and the message that he asks us to give, he will bless.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's very well said. And It's amazing, to my mind, that it's the blessing of God. When we follow the blueprint, and that's what you've said is part of the blueprint, when we follow the blueprint, then God brings folk out of the woodwork. He's not going to bring folk into the church that is not preaching his message, because they'll all be screwed up. Yes, sorry.
Hi, Geoff. Can you just outline in a little bit more detail the difference between the small group of the Sunday keeping churches and the small group that you're talking about?
Right. The difference is basically that the Sunday keeping groups are more fellowship, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the Adventist model that we're going to present to you includes fellowship, but it includes a lot more than that. It includes doctrinal instruction. And the Sunday keeping churches do not major in that at all.
And Geoff, would you add to that evangelism within the group itself?
That's right, very much so.
Yeah.
It's evangelistic.
Yeah.
That is not true of the Rick Warren model at all. Because what they're doing basically is taking a Sunday keeper from this church to my church. And there's very little difference in the doctrine, whereas when a person comes into the Adventist church, it's not just taking one church to another and the same thing, not at all. First of all, you've got a different day that we worship on. And the person's not just going to wander, or very few will just wander into the church on Sabbath thinking, well, this is a good day to... People don't think of Sabbath to go to church. They think of Sunday to go to church, but not Sabbath to go to church. Unless they've had a background in that, and that's the exception rather than the rule. So we have to start from a very different base than the Sunday keeping church. Get the idea? Does that make sense too? Therefore, the whole idea of the thing is different. Now, they may have food, depending upon where it's run, but our model is certainly having a doctrinal part, because the Bible says that. It says in Acts 2, they shared their doctrines one with another. Yep. And it also said they broke bread together. So once again, the model that we're following is exactly based on the book of Acts, and the small group model, because they went from home to home and so forth. So, but look, the best idea is to get in to have a look at this book and start to read it for yourself, and you'll soon see the difference. And the good thing is that it works. Yeah.
Hi, Geoff. I'm Brad.
Yes,
Oh,
okay.
sorry.
Pat's very patient. He told me that last night, he heard last night.
Thanks, Geoff. Geoff, I'd love to hear from how Johnny Wong actually convinces people they need to come out of a secular world, and what's the criteria that he uses to bring them into church, because each and every one of us, I'm sure, have spoken to people in our daily walk in this world.
Yes.
And spoken about God and his love and all the rest of it, and we only get so far, and some further than others, and most just a fleeting glance at what you're talking about. But I'd love to know what convincing arguments did he put up to bring people to Christ?
Well, sometimes it's not arguments, it's necessary.
Maybe rephrase that word, not use arguments, but what...
No, but it may not be a doctrinal thing at all. It's friendship. And friendship is not just a meeting once. Friendship is developed over a period of time. Now, if you're working with a work colleague, then you will have a friendship with that person, and you can be a little bit more direct. But if you're meeting someone for the first time, and he covers that. There's a story, I was just looking for it here. He talks about a guy that came to... that he met playing tennis. I just can't just locate it where it is. But look, you will get onto it when you start to study the book. He covers exactly the question you've asked and explains how it's done. And remember this, that he talks about a small group of around about 8, and 8 to 10, with 3 families involved, 3 Adventist families, or 3 Adventists, different Adventists in the small group. They may not always be families, but and the reason is so that the food preparation and so forth is not by the same person all the time. The burden is shared. And if someone gets sick, then someone else can carry the small group on. There's a very good reason why he selects that every small group must have 3 good, solid Adventists in it for a start. And then it grows from then. And he says that if a small group has gone for 6 months and there is no seekers in it, he will disband it. And that's a very big difference to the Sunday keepers. That it'll be disbanded because that small group is not achieving what it was set out to achieve. It's got to have seekers in it. And you may not start with a seeker because you might meet with your 3, pray together, and as we're going to invite our friends and so forth, but it's within 6 months you should be able to have someone in it.
So a seeker is someone that brings somebody else into it?
Yes, a seeker is a non-member. We have one member, I'm talking about now our church, we have one member who told me she has 18 contacts that she wants to invite to her small group. She wants to run a small group. She has 18 contacts. Now, let's say only 50% of those come. She's got 9. And even if you cut that in half again, she's still got 3 or 4. Or 4, between 4 and 5, haven't you? So you see, once you start to learn how to do it, and you then begin to think about, I reckon the so-and-so might be interested coming to my home, and especially when they know they're going to get fed and so forth. And students, I tell you, if you know students, they love coming in to have a feed. They're as poor as church mice, and that's a good way to get them in, through the stomach. So these are all good ideas. Brother,
Thanks,
Jason,
Geoff.
is it?
Brad.
Sorry.
My wife and I were just looking at each other going, what's the blueprint? And that was either because we're late or because we're ignorant or both. But you're referring to this blueprint over and over again. What is it that you're alluding to?
The blueprint is found in this book we talked about at the beginning, and it's entitled Welfare Ministry. And I've just mentioned 3 of the points. One is to study Isaiah 58. The second was that we developed the Dorcas Society. The third one is that we have small groups and we have a business. Now, when you see the base now, you can see how lots of people can be involved. Some people will love the business side of it. You know, they really get excited. Yeah, I'd really like to be involved with the business. Others would say, Dorcas Society is right up my alley. I'd love to be involved in the Dorcas, in helping people or doing this or doing that. Others would say, small groups is my thing. I just like that idea. So that's why we're not saying that every person has to do everything. We can't do that. You just do one thing and do it well, and then you'll be such a blessing to the church. And believe me, within 12 months or so, you will have lots of new people wanting to come along. We have at Stanmore, and we're in an inner city, tough environment, but we have folk who just come in. And we've got our church members now, and by the way, it is our new people that are our best ferrets. The new people. Some of them not even baptised. So the quicker we can get more new people in, the better it is. Because they'll embarrass some of our older members who ought to be much better than they're doing. And, you know, Stanmore's no different to any other church. We've got some issues, and I could tell you the issues, but I'm not. But I could, because don't think I'm not suggesting that Stanmore is the perfect model at all. No, far, far from it. But I'm just saying we are struggling. We want to get this church back on track so that the church can look after itself. And I've been there now for a couple of years, and my purpose is that I want to be able now to get out to other churches to help other churches. I've told them, I've spent enough time with you. You now know what to do. You are responsible now for the church. I will not be here every Sabbath. You've got to take care of yourself. You're big boys now. And you've got to look after yourself and be responsible. I'm always here to help you, but my field is bigger than just Stanmore. I want to go to Toowoomba. We're helping build a church for the folk, our members at Alice Springs. Anyone been to Alice Springs? Good, okay. A lot of you grey nomads, I can see. Yes, well, you'll remember you've been to Alice Springs, and they meet in what was going to be built as a hall, and that's become the church over the last 20 or so years. And I've said to the pastor there, because I go out every year to help them, and I've said to David, you've been too long around this mountain. You need to build your church, because next door, those of you who've been to Alice Springs will remember they've got a big block that was given to them by the government, and we've got a place to build. And now with the folk that we've got together at Stanmore, I have a guy that has all the contacts in China. We are going to literally bring every single thing in from China. Every last screw will be brought in from China at a fraction of the cost. And we're going to build a big shed that won't look like a shed when it's finally built, but it'll be basically a big shed. And we're going to use the church as a multi-purpose centre, so that we will have the rostrum cut off from the rest of it, and then we can put seats, single seats into the rest. They can be taken up if we want to have a sport, or if we want to have what they want to do, but it's a multi-purpose, because otherwise the church is only there for 2 or 3 meetings a week, and I think it's not a good use of our money to have all that money tied up and we only use it a few times. So that's going to be all brought in from China, as I said, a fraction of the cost. And my friend Chris at Stanmore, who I'll tell you a little bit more about what we're doing with Chris in a moment, but he is able to, because he's got the contacts. You can understand that if you're going to bring stuff in from China, you can be taken for a ride, because there are degrees of, what shall I say? Quality, that's the word, quality. And you can be paying for top quality and get bottom quality. But we have a girl in China who's paid by us to source the very best, so that we know that the material that we get is the top. The stuff that you would buy in the best shops anyway. Don't forget, it comes from China. All we're doing is circumventing that and saving you thousands of dollars. Tens and tens of thousands of dollars, let me tell you. We're happy to share all that. That's something that we want to do as a ministry to other churches. As I've told my church, my ministry is bigger than Stanmore. I want to work with other churches who are like-minded to us and who want to see the work done, who have a belief and confidence in our message, and who want to share it together. Brother.
Oh, yes. I was going to just ask a question about, the background is, years ago I was down in Brisbane, and we were running small groups.
Yes.
Every week, usually to reach out to uni students, because it was a youth-based group.
Yes.
One of the challenges that we found was that keeping the members focused long-term on the purpose of the group, because after a while it started to drift a little bit and it started to be used as just a social gathering on Friday nights.
That'll kill it.
It did, and it tended towards some sometimes disruptive behaviour during the meeting, which the new people, it wasn't the best example. How would you deal with that long-term?
That'll be covered in this.
It is.
Johnny's very much aware of what you're talking about.
Yes.
And he says, if you run a small group and it's amongst Adventists, it'll die very soon. For the very reasons you've just said. They get weary and well-doing. Oh, what's the purpose? Tonight I'll miss out. I've got to, take my girl to the tennis or something, and then someone else gets the idea, oh, well, if she missed out, and I'll miss out, and before long the thing collapses. But when you have a focus on the new people, that's an entirely different matter. Yes. And it's another reason why it's important to have 3 good Adventists, good, solid Adventists, as your base for your small group, who are reliable, who are committed to it. Then it's very, very unlikely to fail. 4 churches he's developed.
Yep.
So, and I was going to ask you, did that group last? No, and you've answered it. No, that's why they don't last, because they're not following the principles. That's why we've gone to the trouble of getting this. This is important that we follow this religiously. This is very, very important, because Johnny's been through all, and he's a very smart operator. Very intelligent, very committed Adventist, very been in the business world, turned his back on that so that he could work for God. And he's not that old.
He's just a lay member, isn't he?
Yes, he's a lay member.
Just like you.
Lay member, he's not a minister, no. Very, very committed. Anyone else? Yep. Yes. Thank you, Louise.
You've just hit something that was really, I just said to John, we've been with our group around our neighbourhood.
Yes.
We've done all sorts of things with them for a very long time, but it just seems to have collapsed. Now I know why, because we were doing it alone.
Yes.
We didn't include other church members in our ministry.
Yep, that's very important. Yeah. See, that's why following this book, Johnny's been through all this, and he'll explain to you the reasons why you do it this way. With the food, it's very important that it's never a buffet, because what that does is people go and form little cliques. They will meet then in that little corner and that's a death knell to a small group. You don't have cliques. It's an inclusive experience. All of this is covered in these chapters as you go through, and you'll just love it, and it will work. So I want to encourage you under Pastor Daniel to really get serious about small groups. Small groups is the key to church growth. That is the key. If you asked me and said, do that, and then come and run an evangelistic program a little bit later, and you invite all your friends, all your contacts in your small groups along. And I can tell you, most of them will become Adventists. No prejudice now. They believe it. And so it's exciting. And suddenly you begin to realize it is possible for me to win souls. And when you have someone that you have worked with that has become an Adventist and is baptized, that's when you'll begin to live.
Well, Geoff, if you remember, we had 15 at Bunbury that time after you made that call when you were in Bunbury with me.
Yes.
So we had 15 people answer that call. Yeah.
Yes. Baptised, yeah.
Become Adventists, yeah.
Yes. Well, yes, well, it's I guess there's nothing more satisfying. I mean, I haven't been here for years, and I've caught up on some people that I hadn't seen for a while, and they got in, they've come here, and I say, what are you doing here? Because, they were baptised at such and such a place. But it is very rewarding to see the fruitage of work that has been done years before, still folk in the church and faithful. That's wonderful. And you can experience that too, and we'll do it together through small groups. And we will not let you alone. We'll support you. And you can't tell me that in this church there's not good leadership that can do that. Of course you can. I wish I had some of the leaders here in my church.
Hello,
wonderful.
I'm Brian.
Yes, Brian.
Have you heard of John Hurt's The House of the New World at West Ryde? John Hurt was a Baptist minister, a Surfy, and he had the same concept, but involved all the churches, and they met daily for prayer and everything like that.
Yes.
And John came out of the ex-drug world and involved with Ted Knopfs and the Sydney Rescue Mission and all that sort of thing. And this concept you're bringing is very good because it's still going. It happens to be under the West Ryde Baptist Church label, but I think there are Adventist people who go there, and it was great. You go there every week. It was a drop-in centre. And then there was another one called Cindy's, a Christian church which is interdenominational at Beverly Hills. And people would drop in every day. Mm-hmm. And they used to have all this sort of food, and it was great. And a lot of people got saved. And Johnny Hurt did a great job. He had all the long hair, and he was a surfer. He used to ride the surfboards, and they had all sorts of things going there. So,
yes.
What you're doing is great.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. That's good. Yes, well, you know, there's going to be lots of opportunities for us, and it's exciting because you'll be amazed, and we see the way the Lord blesses us. And when you see these experiences happening in your own life and those that you're associated with, I tell you, it'll make such a difference in your life. And Sue?
How do you protect against burnout in these circumstances?
Well, that's one of the reasons we have 3 in every small group, so that is guarded against. But all we're asking is one night a week, or one afternoon, Sabbath afternoon, Friday night, or any other night of the week. And I think that we've got to get to the stage in our own experience where we say, I'm willing to dedicate one night per week to the Lord's work. Not to making money that night. This is the Lord's work on Tuesday night or whenever it is. Whatever you decide. And I believe if we had a commitment like that from everybody, then we would move mountains. Daniel?
The other thing too is passion. Yes. You know, it's one thing we tend to get passionate about God's ministry, but if we're pouring our souls into something only to see no results,
that's right,
that can be very discouraging.
Yes.
Versus if we are seeing results, we will endure a bit more. Now, we still have to be careful of burnout.
Yes.
But I think that's a massive factor for us is what I'm sacrificing actually going to make a difference?
Yes.
And I think when we apply God's method, we see God work. And sometimes there's a bit of patience, like you said. Might take a little bit to kick off. I mean, the training goes for how long just to train to run one is, you're doing it for a year, right?
Yes.
So there's a process there, but it's like tilling the soil, isn't it? You've got to be patient.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what it's doing, Daniel, is that as the training goes by, the members start to get confident. You know, not confident in the wrong way, but they become, say, I can do this. This is not beyond me at all. If I follow those principles, we will have results. And so that's why the training is so important. It builds your own confidence in doing this.
I was just going to, I'm still open for questions, but I wrote up on the whiteboard, maybe I'll just explain it, because as you were speaking, I couldn't help but write up Christ's method alone. How many of you are familiar with the statement, Christ's method alone? So Ministry of Healing, page 73, paragraph 4, if you can remember that. Page 73, paragraph 4. I'll read it to you, and you tell me how much does this align with what everything he just shared. So Christ's method alone, so this is from Ministry of Healing. It says, Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. Now, just that statement should catch your attention. If you're interested, many of you have asked, how do I reach my friends, my colleagues, that sort of thing? Christ's method alone. Would you agree? Should we follow the Master's method? So how did Jesus do it? What did actually Jesus do? If we were to turn the pages of the Gospels, and I could do that right now with you from page to page, I would show you this method I've written up on the whiteboard. You may not be able to read it, but here it is. The first one is, the Saviour mingled with people as one who desired their good. So what's the first thing you do when it comes to ministering to people? Do you go, hey, have you heard about the Antichrist? So what does it mean to mingle with men as one who desired their good? What is Jesus doing? What's his first step?
Oh, if someone's got interest. Could be boat building and you show an interest.
You show an interest.
Yeah.
I often say to my Bible workers or evangelists, I say, what's your hobbies? They go, oh, I like surfing. Go join a surfing group. Because will you find a commonality? So all of you right now are actually doing evangelism. Did you realise that? You just got to do the rest of it, that's all. So if you go to work, if you have any interaction outside of church, that's the first step. You're mingling with men. But it's not just mingling, is it? Oh, how's the weather? But Jesus mingled with men as one who desired their. He cared about them. He is intentional. The next step is, it says he sympathized with them. So what does sympathize with someone mean? So if I'm mingling with you, but now I actually sympathize with you, what am I doing in our interaction? I'm actually really listening. We think we all do this, but do we do it? You're not listening to me. No. But sympathizing is actually really spending time intentionally in that conversation. Because we can mingle with people and we talk externally about the weather, but that's not evangelism. If Jesus was sitting with you having dinner, do you think it would be your superficial conversation? Or do you think he would be interested in your story and in your life and in your situation? He would listen to your pain, your struggle, whatever it is. And the third step, can you read it up on the board? Then what does he meet? It says, and then he meets there. Did Jesus meet the needs of the people? Now, on an individual level, we could look at John, and very first miracle is the wedding feast. What's the need he meets? The water turns to social need, embarrassment of that time. Now, there are other implications. The very next thing is he meets Nicodemus in John chapter 3. Nicodemus has a spiritual need. John chapter 4, he meets the woman at the well. She has 5 husbands. The man she's with now is not her husband. She has relational issues. We move into John 5, and we have the man at the pool of Bethesda who has a physical infirmity. I could keep going all the way up to the ultimate need in John 11, which is Lazarus. What's his need? That's a pretty good need. Now, who wants to get into that ministry? So Jesus showed us the pattern that he would first spend time with people. He would listen to them. Now, how many of you feel you can do that? Just listen to people. That's ministry. We often think evangelism is what Pastor Geoff does, but remember what Pastor Geoff said last night, how much a percentage of what Geoff does as a public preacher is evangelism. It's about that much. But we all think that's evangelism. But as Geoff said, he knows from experience, Geoff, what happens if a church doesn't do any of this in the community and you turn up to preach?
Fail.
Nothing happens. So 95% of evangelism is just out in the community, connecting with people in a loving way, caring for them, and meeting their what? Needs. And when you meet people's needs, you win what? Trust. Or as Ellen White would say in the book, she says, winning their confidence. Now, how many Aussies are just open to talk spiritually? They're pretty guarded. But if you win people's needs, guess what happens over time? And you just love people. And sometimes it can take 3 years. Depends on the person. But do we love people conditionally, or do we just simply love like Christ loved? Did Jesus go up to people in the tribes and the villages and say, I'll heal you, but are you going to be saved? Or did he just heal people? Think of the lepers, how many came back to thank him, right? So Jesus would just help people and love people and care for people. And it's like love people until they ask why, right? And that's really the Christians. And that's the majority of our thing. But one quick thing, because I'm preaching now, Geoff, one quick thing is one quick example of this. So this not only happens on an individual level with a work colleague or something, so you can apply this principle, and then right to the last bit, which is then it says, follow me, which is you then introduce spiritual things. Now, do we dump the whole 28 fundamentals in the first conversation? No, just a seed, you know. So obviously that's a run through, but this also happens corporately as a church. This is the cycle of evangelism. This is something you can run over 12 months. And as a church, we run, remember Geoff shared before about cooking schools. What would that mean? If you ran a cooking school, what are you doing with people? Are you mingling? Yes. Are you connecting with people? Now, I can run a cooking school that's a lecture and I never talk to you. Am I sympathizing? Or if I do it where we actually sit down and have a meal after, or do I get a chance to really connect with you? So everything how you do matters. And are we meeting a need? So already in one thing, we're connecting with people, we're making friends, and I'm meeting a need. So this is an example corporately how you can do this. But my one quick practical example, and then I'll pass it back over, is when I was doing evangelism and door knocking, this sort of thing, I went and I took over a church from a pastor, and he had been door knocking the area, and he says, I've got all these people, I want you to come along with me and you know, meet them because I'm leaving. So I went with this pastor, and I had this in my mind, the Christ method, because it works. And so his method is this. He would go knock on a door, he would talk to people. So what's he done so far? Mingle. And he would go, oh, hi, and he'd talk to them, and he would say, you should come to church on Sabbath. Now, what has he missed? Yeah, he missed all the other stuff. Now, was his intention good? And so I went along and he was telling me this, and I knew this. I'm like, okay, we're missing something here. And so what I did is when I got to the door, the lady had the screen door closed. She opened the main door, but the screen door. So what does that tell you? What have we not won yet? Okay. And I stood there, and the pastor was talking, and I stepped in, and I said, oh, hello, and then I said, oh, tell me about your story. So what am I doing now? I'm sympathising, and I was really interested in her story. And as I listened to her story and her situation, she said, I'm a single mum, and I've got 2 kids. And I said, that must be really challenging for you. She said, it is. And I said, how are you doing financially? And I just really listened. I didn't care about the spiritual stuff. We put that aside. I just wanted to hear her as a person. And she could tell I really cared about her. And as we were doing this, I was looking around her yard, and I noticed her car was sort of just sitting there and had been sort of sitting there for a while. And I said, is your car working? She goes, no, I can't afford it. It's just broken. And I said, oh, okay, interesting. And then I noticed her grass was really high. So what are some needs? There's a few there. Now, how many of you right now can actually service a car? Put your hand up. A few of you. Okay. Put your hand up if you can't service a car. Yeah, we'll deal with this stuff here, Geoff. I would wreck it. I'd probably just get a hammer, Yeah, that's right. Anyone want to plug their business? Okay, now think of this. This is where the church is powerful, because right here there are people who can meet those needs that I can't meet. This is where collectively we all have a lot of talent, right, Geoff? Mm-hmm. So you know what I did? Is I said to the lady, by the way, in our church, now this is a total lie. It's a lovely lie. But I said, in our church, we mow lawns and we help service people's car. Are you free Sunday? Because we'll send some of our church members along. And she's like, oh, I said, I'm not taking no for an answer. And she goes, oh, okay, sure. And then I grabbed the pastor and pulled him, and we left. And he goes, we don't have a lawn mowing business. I'm like, we do now. So, because what did I need to meet? A need. Because I certainly didn't have a trust, but I know we needed to meet a need. So I said, can you call whoever? And so that night we had a board meeting, and I was just talking in the board meeting about this lady. I said, let's all pray for her. She's a single mum. One of the guys goes, oh, I mow lawns. I have a lawn mowing business. I'm like, great. What are you doing Sunday? So he was excited, because this guy, do you think he's a preacher? He's like, oh, I can't preach, but he can mow lawns. And all of a sudden, one of the other guys who was a mechanic, so guess what they did? I turned up Sunday late, because I don't want to mow lawns. Me and the pastor and all like little clean clothes, we turned up late. There's the guy, the mechanic's there, engine up, fully fixed her car, paid $150 for a new part out of his own pocket. He was so happy to serve the Lord. None of these guys can preach and do all this fancy stuff me and Geoff are doing, but we can't do what they're doing. And there's the other guy out there sweating, mowing the lawn, but smile on his face, because they're serving Jesus Christ and they were happy to do it. Guess what happened? What do you think happened to that screen door? What did I win? She just opened it straight in, walked in, and gave us some water, even though we weren't working. We got the water. And we talked with her, and I think it was about the second or third visit, she said, I'd really love to know more about Jesus, and we did Bible studies. Now, everything doesn't happen that quick, does it? But that's an example, practically, of how this happens. And what Geoff has been sharing is this can happen in a small group dynamic as well. When you come into a small group, what are you doing? Mingling. Sympathizing, meeting needs. This can apply itself in multiple ways. So I just had to share Christ's method alone, because it's exactly the blueprint that works.
Perfect.
Yep.
Any other questions or points? Thank you, Daniel. That was excellent. Brother. Yeah. The mic's coming. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I come from a farm country sort of area where people eat a lot of meat. I know that's not what you do here, but so much. I bet you a lot do, but anyway. The point is, when Seventh-day Adventists push the vegetarian, it tends to scare a lot of people like me all around me a lot, away from the denomination. I find that quite a bit. Now, I'm not saying what she's doing is wrong in any way. It's probably right, but it would probably pull a lot of people in that like that sort of food, but some people do tend to think otherwise and turn off. because of that sort of thing in a big way, I find.
So maybe I'll turn that into a question. So how could we sort of present some of these sort of things in Adventism without pushing people away? Could I put it as a question to Geoff like that?
Let me ask you this question. If you'd been to the doctor and the doctor said to you, you've got the beginnings of heart disease, I'm a bit worried about you and you're a bit overweight, and I'm the doctor now talking to you, see? You're a little bit overweight because he's put you on the thing, and unless you change your diet, because you've told him, he's asked you what you eat, unless you cut back on your meat intake, then you're headed for a heart attack. And so then suddenly you see advertised how to reduce the possibility of a heart attack. How to avoid having a heart attack. Food that will help your heart. Think you might be interested?
I understand that. I grew up like eating a lot of vegetables and stuff and growing them and stuff. And I know vegetables are really good for you. But there's a lot of people out there that eat meat and and I know they're good for you. And a lot of people that do other things too. But I think the word of Christ should be the key more than food. And food's probably a good thing to bring people, and like mowing the lawn, whatever, it works. I think it differs, but I do tend to see a lot of people thinking because of the way Seventh-day Adventists eat, or what they eat, they do get turned off.
Do you think that one of your friends, your neighbours who you're talking about, might be turned off if I come along to them and say, what you need is a good Bible study on Jesus?
I would not. I would.
I reckon you turn 100 times more off by that approach than you would on healthful cooking.
Totally, yeah. But
all we're saying is that there's no approach that's going to win everybody, because everybody's at varying degrees. But I tell you, once you have a need, suddenly your position before, you got cancer or diabetes or the beginnings of heart disease, or you've had a heart attack, then I tell you your needs suddenly change.
I understand that. I agree with it, but I'm just putting it out there.
We recognise that no approach, no matter what we do, is going to appeal to everyone.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a good point, because it's a larger question on and this would get into the training more, that I could bring the truth of Jesus Christ and do it in a total wrong way. Have you heard the Sabbath? Is that truthful? Yeah, but it's not done right? So, like anything, there is a way that we do it with love, and I think that's important. And even something as simple as vegetarianism or health food, as a church, we should always be doing it in a non-condemnation way.
Yeah, I was just going to, in light of what he's saying, what would be the problem if you're inviting other people into your group that aren't Adventists? What would be the problem of serving them up beef or meat on the night? I mean, you might need it yourself, but I cannot see anything wrong with serving meat to someone else to cater for their needs, because it's saying meet their needs. So what would be the problem with that?
I'll tell you what the problem is. Very later you want to teach them about healthful living, and then what are you going to say?
We recognise that we were catering for your needs.
No, you would say that that is covered in that book too. Okay. And I would want you to go through the book and take the logic of it presented, but that is probably not the wisest way to go about it.
I know if you want to hand the mic over there, while that's going on, put your hand up if you're coming from a smaller church than Glenvale. If you're coming from a small church. Geoff, maybe I'll throw a question out perhaps on their behalf, and if you can ask a question specifically for a small church, what would be a little bit of advice you would give, rather than say a larger church like Glenvale, like a little church of 20 people, something like that? Mm-hmm. What would be a good step for them going forward to do this?
Daniel, it's difficult to answer that, because unless you know the need or the ability, the talents in the church. In a church of 20, you might only have someone and I would want to play on the abilities of that local church. It may be someone who's an excellent cook, or it might be someone who's very good at business or massage or some work that they do that they could share in the community, and so win friends that way. We've got to meet folks' needs. As there are some tremendous opportunities for us to get involved with things that we are good at ourselves. It's no good me trying to do massage. I don't know anything about it. It's no good me trying to do cooking. That's not my field at all. But there are plenty of people who are excellent at those things. So we play to our strengths, not our weaknesses.
So rather than necessarily going, oh, here are the needs of the community, which is important,
yes,
rather what's in our hand?
What
5 loaves and 2 fish, or Moses, what's in? I've got this stuff.
That's right.
So you work with what you have, and then as you grow, you can meet more needs.
Correct.
Yep.
I just wanted to answer to some of the concerns that were raised there. I was, for the record, I was not raised an Adventist. I came into the church at the age of 18. And I was a big meat eater.
Right.
An eater of everything else that I shouldn't eat. And I came into a church that was very evangelistic, very big on the health message, prophecy, etc., etc. So chalk and cheese. But I was still baptised in that church, as a meat eater, by the way. And it wasn't until I wound up in hospital that I decided maybe there's something to this lifestyle that they live. And that's when I picked up Ministry of Healing and started reading it. Today I am a vegetarian. The people lived their life in front of me. They did not push it on me.
Yes.
And when the time was right, the Lord led me step by step. So we should not be afraid of being Adventist in front of non-Adventists. We should not be afraid of living our faith before them, because whether they accept it or not is not the issue. What is important is that we demonstrate the truth to them in love. And in time, they will be won over. If they run away because we're vegetarians, well, nothing's going to win them.
Yep. As an example, let's take alcohol. A lot of Aussies, all they know is you go socialise, you have a beer in your hand, a steak on the barbie, right? They don't know anything else. So the Adventist church is a community within a community. We get to show people how to have fun in a totally different way, without alcohol, without these things. And it's not that we condemn them. We shouldn't be doing any of that. It's just like, hey, we love you, and we used to run a really successful youth ministry, and my youth leader's whole goal was, on her vision, was to create a fun environment for young adults that is drug and alcohol free. It was really simple. But she had like 120, my church was 30 people. She had 120 young adults would come to her socials without a single bit of alcohol or from the world, and they loved it. They played music together and did all these things, and it wasn't that it was overly religious, but it was an environment that, and a lot of kids like, I didn't know I could have this much fun without drugs and alcohol. So it's a great example that we got to show them a way, not in a loving way, just, hey, there's another whole lifestyle here. That's really, so.
Daniel, could I just want to share with you one more thing before we close, because we better let you go home. There's one other thing that I haven't told you about that we're doing at Stanmore that you may be interested in. I mentioned my friend Chris. He has, 3 or 4 years ago, bought a vineyard in one of the most prestigious areas in Australia, down by the Snowy Mountains, because apparently, I didn't know this, but I've learnt this, that the best wine comes from the coal country. And so he has bought a vineyard, and let me just rest everyone's concern at this stage. It is non-alcoholic wine that we are targeting, because we are targeting the Muslim market. Now, a good Muslim will not drink the wine that sometimes we drink from the supermarket, because if you look at the label on the supermarket, you'll see it's got 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% alcohol, because it's had alcohol and it's been de-alkalized and they can't get it all out. So a good Muslim won't drink that, even though some good Adventists do. See? So there is a tremendous market we have found for non-alcoholic wine. Not like Petriti. We're not talking about grape juice, sweet grape juice. We're talking about wine. We have already had batches of wine done. We've tested it. We have given it to the very best wine tasters in Australia. They're used to alcohol, but we've asked them to taste our wine, and they maintain it is just the very best. We believe we are on to something which is going to bring into us millions of dollars. Now, the purpose of this, the sale is to the Muslim market because there are millions of them, and it's mainly into the Middle East, not just in Australia. I mean, there's a few in Australia, but nothing compared to what there is in the Middle East. And the purpose of us selling that and the wine that we will get money for is to bring into the church so that we can grow our evangelism. And when we're talking about evangelism, we're not just talking about public evangelism. I'm talking about evangelism in its broadest sense. And once again, we believe that God has led us in this area. We already have 4 years of vintage in vats at the moment that we're just waiting to process. It's all it's frozen, so it's kept. And we've got the vintage coming off this month. Late in the next week or two, we're taking off this year's. It's ready to harvest. And the difficulty that we are presented with right now is that because of COVID, we can't get into Malaysia. Now, Malaysia is where we have our factory. We've done it in Malaysia for a number of reasons. One is because labour is cheaper there. We can get our bottles and so forth much, much cheaper. But also, most importantly, it's a Muslim country selling them into the Muslim world. Get the idea? Which is a great advantage. Now, we are going to bring this wine back into Australia to sell to all the 5, 6-star hotels because that will be our market, the very top echelon. Chris has given us at Stanmore the Australian rights to this wine, and that's something else that you may be interested in. We may come to an agreement with you, if you're interested, that is, but I'm just floating the idea that we might come to an agreement at the appropriate time whereby if some of you here would be interested in marketing for us into the hotels in this area, part of Australia, then you would be able to have some of that profit come into your church, into your area. So there are lots and lots of possibilities. What I'm really laying out for you is that there are lots of possibilities. And that I believe that God is opening up avenues of opportunity for us that have never been opened before. And as a church, usually we have sort of said, oh, the business world and then there's the church world. Well, as I read the Spirit of Prophecy, the two can go together. And as long as the tail doesn't wag the dog, as we said before, then and we keep that in balance and in perspective, then it can become a very, very profitable thing. And not everybody in the church is going to be involved with this. This would be perhaps 1 or 2 people's work for the church, their missionary work for the church. And there are more possibilities. We are planning to bring in all the dried fruit from the Middle East. Now, you know yourself when you go down to buy apricots, they're orange, and you know very well the reason they're orange is because they're full of sulfur and chemicals. We want to bring in dried fruit from the Middle East, which will be sun-ripened, and bring them into Australia and once again sell them because we believe that there's a huge market for that as well. And Chris has the contacts in the Middle East. He spent a lot of his years in the Middle East. He knows the Middle East very, very well. And so I guess what I'm saying to you is there's lots of possibilities. And I want you to get perhaps a bigger vision than it's perhaps before today, to see that there are lots and lots of opportunities that God is giving to us, so that we can help to support the church in whatever it's doing. You may be able to even afford to build the church out the front. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, look, what I'm saying is that there are huge opportunities, and you have the best opportunity that I know of. I mean, you've got a wonderful position here, great land, and there are lots and lots of things that you could do with that will be very productive for evangelism. So I guess, Daniel, that what we are saying today is that as we work together, and I'm very happy to work, between us, Daniel and I will work together, and as we do that on different fronts, and the small groups and on the business and so forth, there could be lots of opportunities for us all to be involved in helping God's work in these last days. Yep. So do you like some of those ideas? Yeah, I think there's great possibilities. And so we'll leave it with you guys, but thank you for your attention this afternoon. Remember, the training doesn't last just for half an hour or 2 hours on Sabbath afternoon. That's what we've done today is not training, that is just casting the vision. And the training will take place if you want to become involved weekly as we get involved with that. So,
so I guess a bit of a where to from here
yes.
To speak to Glenvale's position, and this would incorporate any of the churches in the region. We're going to meet as elders. The elders have this book. They've been reading through it. We're going to catch up. We're going to have a conversation around the book and start to strategize, because these are principles and obviously clear methodology, but every church look a little different. Like we know that Highfields is a smaller church than Glenvale, or maybe you're from Chinchilla or Dalby or something, and you're a different context. So it's about sitting with your team and applying these principles in them. So we certainly would like to be part of helping any of you to do that. But as a Glenvale church, we'll meet with the elders and we'll keep our members and our board in conversation going forward to strategize and to plan, and then we can reconnect with a Zoom. And Maps, if we're going to have that Zoom session and to have some of that, I'll make sure I let everyone know who's been here and who's interested to jump on and to get access to that conversation, that training. But if someone does want to chat to you, how would they get a hold of you? Email or something if they have some follow-up questions perhaps on any of this? Yep.
I'm happy to share my
your
mobile.
Email? Yep, so we can...
because, as I said, I have a conviction that this is bigger than one church. These ideas are bigger than just for one church. And we want to work together. And I think as we work together, we're going to have much more success than trying to just all work on our own. Because we can learn from one another. You will have experiences. Daniel, you'll find experiences here. Folk will come up with ideas that we've never thought of. Yep. And as we hear about them, we say, wow, that's a good idea. That's We're going to grab that one too. Yep. So, and vice versa. Yep. And as we work together as a team, I think our success is going to be greater.
What's amazing, just to finish, is I just came from a church plant, started with 4 people. We ended up with 60 people. And my vision from the beginning, through doing evangelism, following Christ's method alone in the field and seeing what works, is I recognized that we had to apply these principles before I even read the book.
Right.
And apply this on a corporate scale. So my vision was that we have to get away from the idea, hence business unusual, of a church with a cross on top that we only meet in for 2 hours on a Sabbath. But I had a vision that 7 days a week we're ministering to the needs holistically of our community, as Christ would. And I hope that this vision can even carry forward, because it's not just a particular church vision, it's Adventism. It's holistic.
Correct.
And God was able to take a little church, and when I walked away, I handed the new pastor a check for $3.2 million we raised like that for him to buy a facility. So God used me to sort of pioneer it, but that was my job. And then coming up here, but it shows that God is behind this sort of thing and what's going on. So,
well, imagine how much you're going to raise here.
Yeah. Especially when Baven starts selling all his topsoil as a ministry. Yeah. Can we get a vineyard going, Baven? Is that hard to do? All right, done. Out the back. All right. So, yeah, look, I hope you guys have been inspired, and I always love to talk about evangelism. And most of all, I hope you recognize that the word evangelism, get out of your mind just someone up the front, but you mowing a lawn, us meeting the needs, that's evangelism. That's ministry, and all of us have a part to play in the future of God's work in the church.
Yes.
Yeah, so
very good.
All right, well, just to finish before we pray, make sure to come down the front. If you are from one of the regional churches and you don't have a book, we'd be happy to try and get some into your hand. By the way, Baven, how many books did we get? Okay. All right. Make sure Baby doesn't try and sell them to you, okay? We are being entrepreneurial and everything, but no, for free, take them. By the way, Johnny sent the whole box. Guess how much? Free. But we're going to be giving some money, aren't we, Babe? And we'll give some money to donate to his ministry because it would have been hundreds and hundreds of dollars. But that, yeah, to support Johnny's ministry. So, yeah, if you would like to give some money to that, we're happy to. But please feel free to take it back to your church, talk to your board, talk to your elders, and read it through. Have some vision. So, yeah, come down the front for that. If you want to get Geoff's phone number, I won't write it on the whiteboard because you'll all start texting him at 3 in the morning. But come and talk to him personally, and I'll keep you in touch about future Zoom. But, yeah, anything you want to plug here?
Now, you're all aware of the Beyond. This is an excellent series to get people's interest. It's not designed to get folk ready for baptism. It's a softer approach, done purposely that way, but it's designed to get folks' interest. How many of you have watched this series? Okay, some of you haven't. Well, let me encourage you. There are many sets of this in the church library here. So those of you who haven't watched it, and those of you who haven't watched it for a long time, ought to re-watch it, because each episode covers some of our basic doctrines, but it's done in a way that is designed to approach people and get their interest. It's a bit like Jesus. He told parables to teach truth. These are 3 stories in every episode to teach a story, or teach a truth. And for example, I think it's number 3, on why is there pain, that it deals the story of a little girl who couldn't feel pain. And you see her in the filming of her hitting her head against the corner of the kitchen table. And immediately when you see her hit it, you sort of feel the pain yourself. But she doesn't even flinch. And when her mother was interviewed, she's got to wear things over her eyes because otherwise she would pull her eyes out and not even feel it. And so the whole episode explains that pain has a purpose. And then at the end of each of these stories, there are 28 Bible studies, all centered around the subject of the beginning tape. And I would like you to have a look at these, because it will strengthen your confidence in all our messages. There's 28 Bible studies, so we just about cover all the central truths of Adventism in the Bible studies. We sit round the table and talk about it. And for those of you who are not used to a menu on a DVD, you've got to press the second menu. I think it's explained, explore further. And that's where the Bible studies are. Some folk have watched the 3 stories at the beginning and don't realise that there are Bible studies on it as well. So if you haven't watched these, I would like to suggest that you do it. And once you've done it, you need to know first, and then you know who you can lend them to your friends. Because basically, the questions that we're asking are the questions that people ask. That's why we did them. And, of course, you're all familiar with this. Every young person, if you showed your kids this, tell the world.
It's on YouTube as well, the full movie.
Okay, so you can get it on YouTube, yes.
Yep.
But your kids, you ought to sit down with your kids and watch it with them, with your grandchildren, watch it with them, because the whole story is showing how Adventism arose and the disappointments and the issues that went on in the 1840s, 50s, 60s and 70s. And Ellen White's ministry, every child, every young person ought to understand this and see it and help them to understand where our church began. So that's another excellent resource. So that's available in the church too, or on YouTube, as you say.
Excellent. All right, well, there's heaps more we could share. I remember door knocking the Search, which was before the Beyond.
Yes.
VCR tapes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I don't know when we go back there, but I remember, handing
Vita.
VCR tapes out on the doors, and it was
VCR.
super successful.
Yeah.
People were learning all about God, so, yeah. All right, well, let's finish with prayer. Then you guys can get the blood moving. We'll get around, but feel free to come down and talk to Pastor Geoff. Again, like I said, come and grab a book if you don't already, and we'll be here to help you out. So
Laban's brought the books in, so...
No, we don't have enough for everyone. So let me be clear. If you're in leadership,
some from each church ought to have some.
just a couple for your leadership. Yeah,
and
that would be great.
We can get some more.
Yes. Yep. We're happy to support and yep. Okay. All right. Maybe we'll get you a piece of paper and a pen, Baven. And if you go over to Baven, again, don't let him give you money. He's, but yeah, he'll get your name, and we'll make sure that we just have a bit of a file there. So, yeah. Okay, Geoff, how about you finish with prayer for us?
Our Father in heaven, we just thank you again today for the privilege of working together with the angels of heaven. Thank you, Lord, for the privilege of working for you. And I pray that you will bless us, bless every member here. Thank you, Lord, for them and their commitment and their love for you. Please continue to bless us and give us opportunities. Inspire our minds, enlighten our minds, give us ideas, so that we can further and advance your work. And so continue to bless us through this week and bring us back again next Sabbath, I pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. That's your book.